Hello everybody, my name is Jonas Vanov, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to deal with discoloration that may occur when you're doing your dodge and burn work. First of all, let me explain that this is a tech tutorial only, so I'm not going to show you how to do good dodge and burn, but I'm only going to show you how to deal with discoloration. So, I'm going to show you first what we're dealing with, because I have my dodge and my burn layers here. I'm going to show you some different methods to deal with discoloration. But of course, first of all, we have to see why we're talking about discoloration in the first place. That is because, as you can see here, I've created a shadow on the woman's shoulder. And if you compare this shadow here with some of the shadows around here, you can see that this shadow is actually a little more saturated and it's a little too yellow compared to this shadow here, and this is a very common problem when you're doing dodging and burning. The same thing is true when you look at this highlight here and compare to this highlight here, because the highlights are actually a little saturated and a little too yellow, and we are going to correct this now. The first method is actually pretty simple, but it will only work when you're working with masks. So if you're working with curves or levels in this case, it will work just fine, but otherwise it won't work as easily. And so this works by just placing a new hue and saturation adjustment layer clipped to the burn or dodge layer, and now you can just saturate or desaturate the area that is affected by the mask. I've already done this here. For example, I've desaturated my shadows a little and shifted the hue a little more towards red. And for my dodge curve, I added a little bit of saturation and shifted the hue a little bit towards yellow. To check your results, you might want to use my supporting layers. You don't have to, but I did this, so that's how you want to check it. However, if you want to work with dodge and burn layers on a soft light neutral gray layer, or a soft light layer in general, it's not so easy to correct the discoloration that may occur. And so I've thought about a few different methods to deal with it. One of the easiest ways is to simply use color inside your soft light layer. And if you're painting with color, you can actually saturate, desaturate, and shift the hue in one fell swoop. However, beginners might find this a little confusing because you have to know a little about color theory. For example, I decided that without the color, the burn looked a little too saturated, and so I had to use the complementary color to yellow, which is a blue tone, and I used a light yellow to saturate the highlights. So this might get a little confusing, and so I thought about a few other methods that you can use that will help you shift the color after you're done with your dodging and burning, and so you don't have to choose the proper colors to begin with. So one method that will probably come to mind at first would be to just paint on a new layer without the 50% gray fill. And so you could just do that and clip a hue and saturation adjustment layer to it. However, I'm going to show you. This is before, this is after. However, this won't work usually. That is because the standard way in which the layers blended, when we clip a hue and saturation adjustment layer to the dodge and burn layer, the hue and saturation adjustment layer tries to change the saturation and the hue of the pixels of the dodge and burn layer, which are black and white in this case, so they have neither saturation nor hue, or they have a saturation of 0 points, but you get what I mean. And so what I have to do is double click on my dodge and burn layer and uncheck the checkbox blend clip layers as a group. This way, Photoshop will first blend this layer, and afterwards, using the transparency of this layer, blend the hue and saturation layer, but they won't first of all blend together, and afterwards the result will be blended in soft light mode. However, there's still a problem with this method, because when you're using this, you can't determine whether you want to affect the highlights or the shadows, and you have to work with both. You might think, okay, let's try blend if. However, as you might see, let's try to make this really clear here. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it in the video. I can see it pretty clearly here. As you can see, the blend if sliders don't work with the dodge and burn pixels, but they work with the pixels of the underlying image, and so you can't really determine whether you're lightening or darkening the image, and so this won't work that easily. It would work if we were to uncheck the blend, to check the blend clip layers as a group checkbox again, but then again, the hue and saturation adjustments won't work again. So we'll have to use another method. Now for the other method, I posted this in a Retouch Pro thread already, so you might know that. For this, I've just created a new group in soft light mode, and I'm just going to place my dodge and burn layer with 50% gray fill on it. And now I'm just going to create 2 hue and saturation adjustment layers, both in normal mode, and I'm just going to check the colorize checkbox and enter a hue for my highlights and saturation. This will actually colorize my highlights, and so it's a little different from what we used here, where we colorized the underlying image. Now we are colorizing the dodge and burn pixels. You should be aware of that. However, what's important is that I've used the blend if sliders in this case, and I used the black slider here, pull it over to 129, and now alt-click on it to split the slider and drag that part over to 255. Now I'm going to do the same for my highlights, for my shadows, sorry. I'm just going to check the colorize checkbox again, enter a hue, a saturation, go to the advanced blending options, and now I'm just going to bring the white triangle over to 127 and split it and bring it over to 0. That way we can also deal with the desaturation. However, this method is a little clumsy to set up, and so I thought about another method. And for this, I'm just going to use the selective color adjustment layer. To do this, all I have to do is clip a new selective color adjustment layer to my dodge and burn layer. Make sure that the method is set to absolute. And now what we can do is go to the whites and enter in different values to change the tone of my whites. For example, the yellow slider is especially useful because we can set the saturation or desaturation with it. In the blacks, we can set the yellows so that the shadows become a little less saturated. Oops. And so this gives a lot of flexibility. However, you have to know a little about how the color systems work, so you have to know about complementary colors, you have to know about which colors you want to affect, And of course, you also always have to go to the colors and choose the whites, choose the blacks to work with it. And so, here's just another method for you. For my last method, I told you it worked, right? For my last method, I used a gradient map. And to do this, I'm just going to create a new gradient map adjustment layer and make sure that the smoothness is set to 0%. Next, I'm going to add a new color swatch here in the middle. Set the color to 128, 128, 128. And for the location, enter in manually 50%. 50% so. And now I can easily choose my highlight and shadow color. For example, I can set my shadow color to something like a bluish tone. I can set my highlight color to a yellowish tone. And so I can change the color of my highlights and shadows this way. So now we have it. A few methods to change the color of our dodge and burn and prevent discoloration with this. I hope you've enjoyed it, learned a thing or two. My personal favorite is the selective color, but you might choose whatever you want to. That's why I've showed you so many methods. And so if you have any questions left, feel free to email me, jonas_vendorf@web.de, or just Skype me JonasW234. Until then, have a great time and Happy New Year. Goodbye.